The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Trust leads to conflict. Conflict leads to commitment. Commitment leads to accountability, and accountability leads to results.
Brook Cupps is the head boys basketball coach at Centerville High School in the state of Ohio. Brook graduated from Graham High School in St. Paris, Ohio, near Springfield in 1995. And following a 4-year playing career at Capital University in Columbus, he returned to Graham. He became the head coach in 2000 and spent 12 seasons at Graham. In 2012, following his time with the Falcons, including a trip to the state semifinals, Coach Cupps left his alma mater to become the head coach at Centerville High School, where he has earned several Coach of the Year honors while guiding the Elks to multiple Sweet 16 and Elite 8 appearances. His 2021 team recorded a school record 26 wins on the way to the Division I state championship in Ohio, the first in school history. His 2022 team was the state runner-up. Brook is the author of the book Surrender the Outcome. He also teaches 2 leadership courses at Centerville and writes a weekly blog on bluecollargrit.com. Hey Hoopheads, practice like the pros this July with our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Save up to $4,000 on multi-unit orders in the month of July. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Peter Lonigan, Basketball Australia's Head of High Performance Coach Development, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
If you're looking to improve your coaching, please consider joining the Hoop Heads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoopheads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Follow us on social media at hoopheadspod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out the Hoopheads Podcast Network for more great basketball content. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its play bank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Be sure to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Brook Cupps, head boys basketball coach at Centerville High School in the state of Ohio. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads Podcast. It's Mike Klinsing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are pleased to be joined by Brook Cupps, the head boys basketball coach at Centerville High School here in the state of Ohio. Brook, welcome to the Hoop Heads Pod.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Excited to have you on. Really looking forward to diving into all the things that you've been able to do throughout your basketball career. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about some of your first experience with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it?
Growing up, my dad was a teacher for 30 years. My mom was a school bus driver. I have a brother that's 7 years older than me. And my brother was a diehard football guy. He was coached football for a long time. He was a defensive coordinator for LaSalle when they won a state championship. And so football was kind of my thing. And then in 7th grade, Tim Casey, who was at Kettering Fairmont, he was at St. Paris Graham, where I went to school for just a few years. And I was in 7th grade. And then from there, he went on to Fairmont, and now he's at Upper Arlington in Columbus. But Coach Casey just had like this passion and love for the game that was just so new to me and got me hooked as a 7th grader. Really before that, I mean, I kind of played, but nothing serious. So I attribute a lot of that to Coach Casey in terms of me really falling in love with the game.
How valuable you think it was for you at a young age? Sounds like you played a bunch of different sports, like a lot of kids that were from the same era that you and I are from. Just how would you describe your multi-sport experience growing up compared to maybe the way the kids grow up today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was good. I mean, you know, times obviously changed some, but like, I mean, it was in the winter, it was basketball season. So I played basketball. In the spring, it was baseball. So I played baseball. And in the fall, it was football. So I played football. You know, and I just remember more than anything, I remember running around outside, riding my bike, jumping mulch piles, swimming in the creek, and, you know, grew up out in the country. So it was just like you were just never inside. You were always outside doing stuff. And, you know, it's a great way to grow up. I enjoyed it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Once you started to get more serious about the game of basketball, what did you do to start working on your game and really trying to improve as a player?
Yeah. So, I mean, my dad really had no experience with basketball. And so going through 7th and 8th grade, I worked a lot. Like that wasn't anything foreign. That was definitely from my parents. So once I kind of started liking basketball, I mean, I was all in. But I'd work out in the mornings before school all the time. And I would, you know, I would write I'd take notes in class with my left hand because I thought that would make me better. I'd walk around squeezing a racquetball, thinking I would strength arms. And, you know, I did a lot of stuff where I was trying to just maximize what I had. I don't think I was gifted with, you know, any type of extreme athleticism or anything like that. And really, I hadn't been around the game of basketball very much growing up. But, you know, I was lucky that so through middle school, Coach Casey was the coach. And then my sophomore year, I played freshman as a freshman. And my sophomore year, Dave Zeller took the Graham job. And Z was he's still like probably one of the people I look up to the most in terms of how he handled himself professionally within coaching, how he built relationships with guys. He had a huge impact on me. So I was really lucky to have him kind of come in my sophomore year. So I played freshman as a freshman, and I started varsity as a sophomore with Coach Zeller as my coach. Just kind of, he thought I was a lot better than I thought I was. You know, I'm sure you've heard that, and I'm sure we've done that with kids. And, you know, it's just he elevated my play because he believed in me more than I really believed in myself.
When you think back to those high school years and you think about the kids you played with, your teammates, and obviously the feelings that you had for Coach Zeller, what are some of there's 1 or 2 memories you have that stand out from your high school time?
Yeah, man, there's a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them, we had good teams. I mean, we were never really great, but we were pretty good. And just growing up with the same group of guys and then getting to play in high school together with them, and, you know, the pickup games on Saturdays where everybody would just come play. You know, obviously the thing that gets lost, I think, a lot of times in high school sports is just the value of the locker room and just sitting around talking to the guys and hanging out after practice. And, you know, all those things that seem trivial and minor at the time are really the biggest things. And, you know, I definitely look back to those times. Probably the thing that stands out to me the most about like the one memory that I have is it changed. I didn't get this till later when I started really reflecting and understanding how I wanted to coach. But Coach Zeller was one of the most humble, servant-minded people I had ever been around. I mean, Coach Zeller was an All-American at Miami of Ohio. He played for the Cincinnati Royals behind Oscar Robertson, and like he was an unbelievable player. You know, and I remember him. I still actually have tape. Like, he used to tape my ankles before games, and he would write on the tape, "shoot the ball." Like, and I still have some of that tape. I got a box, like a shoebox at home, like, my high school. I mean, it's just like, it's such a reminder to me that like the impact that you have, you're not even aware that you're having. I'm sure Z never knew I held on to that kind of stuff, but he definitely knew how much I cared about him. And then for him, Coach Zeller never won a district championship. And that really, like, when I was kind of going through my coaching journey and changing my first 6 or 7 years of coaching, I was just like, figure out how to win the next game. I was chasing wins. I was chasing the acclaim. I was comparing myself with just everybody else. And I got to a point where I knew I couldn't continue in that rat race. And Z's example was a major part of that, because what I got back to is like, man, hold on a second. Like, all these people are saying, like, you got to win a state championship, or you got to win this, you got to be a college coach to be really good, or to be great at coaching. And I thought back to Coach Zeller. I'm like, I don't think there's anybody better than him. Like, no one would have had more of an impact on me than he had. And so it really changed the way I defined success, because I couldn't say like I was more successful than Coach Zeller if I won a district championship, because I know he's a better coach than I am. And so it threw me for a whirlwind. It made me really start thinking about, what does success really look like in this, this coaching thing. So
when you were playing, when did coaching get on your radar? Was that something that you kind of always knew in the back of your mind that, hey, when I'm done, I'm going to get into coaching? Obviously with your dad being a teacher, your mom being a school bus driver, that being in education was not foreign to you. But was that something that you were thinking about early on, or was it something that you didn't come to until you could kind of see your playing career coming to an end?
No, it was pretty early on. I mean, I was always a guy that had to like kind of scrap around to be able to compete and play. So I was always kind of small, had to take charges, had to dive on the floor. I was always kind of in like that leadership role, and that's kind of what I did. That was a way I separated myself from other guys and was able to, have a strength and talent maybe that some other people weren't willing to have. And so, I knew, I had an inkling when I was in high school that's something I could want to do. I might want to do. My dad had helped coach baseball. I knew my brother was getting into coaching football. And, I think by the time I was in college, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Talk a little bit about your college experience and how you ended up at Capital.
Yeah. So at Capital at the time, Coach Goodwin's second year at Capital. So we were really kind of his first recruiting class. And the assistant coaches were Matt Crosey, who's now the head coach at Wittenberg, and Mike Holwager, who Coach Holwager was actually on my staff at Centerville a few years ago. So we had a great staff and a great group of coaches. For me, it was down to Capital and Witt. Witt was real close to where I grew up. Both were great schools. I liked Coach Brown at Wittenberg at the time. And I don't know, Coach Crosey was the guy that recruited me, oddly enough, to Capital. He was kind of my lead recruiter. And I like the toughness that Coach Goodwin brought. And no doubt it changed the way I do things. Like he had a huge impact on, tough is one of my core values. And I think Coach Goodwin had a lot to do with kind of bringing that out in me and understanding what that really meant to be tough. So I had a good career. I played there for 4 years. I played varsity 4 years. I started my last 3. And, we were on my freshman year. We had a great team. We lost in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. I played a lot and, made a lot of good friends and relationships. And, it was a good experience. I wouldn't trade it for sure.
It just speaks to, right, being in the right place and with the right coaching staff and the right school. And I think that's one of the conversations that we have a lot of times here on the podcast with coaches, is just everybody's kind of chasing this scholarship dream, right? And when you chase that, sometimes we overlook like how important it is to just find the right fit and find an experience that's going to be a good one for you. And it kind of hit me when you were talking a little bit about your high school experience and just those little things in the locker room, and just that when you look back on it, that's some of the most important, those are some of the most important moments that you had when you were a high school player, and that those are the things that you remember. And I think so often, and I'm sure you see it, that kids are so focused and families are so focused on what's next. And I mean, that starts from the time they're in second, third grade, like what travel team am I going to play on next? And am I going to be a starter on the middle school team? And when am I going to be a starter on the varsity? And when am I going to be all state? When am I going to get my scholarship offer? And what AAU team am I going to play for? And there's all this stuff, and everybody's always looking at what's coming next instead of just, look, and I get it, but to the same point, I think it's just enjoy the moment where you are and try to maximize it. Because as you and I both know, it goes way too fast, no matter whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, whatever it is that you're doing. That time, those seasons, those experiences go really, really fast. And once they're gone, you don't get them back. And I think that's something that we sometimes miss with the way the system's set up today.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's one of the huge roles of coaches, helping kids stay present and appreciate the opportunities and where they are, and then helping them to define success on their terms rather than society's terms. I mean, I think that's what kids get caught into. How many points am I averaging? Am I going to start? Where's my scholarship? What am I ranked? That's all outside of your control, man. That is society telling you what's important instead of focusing on the things that we all really know are important.
Absolutely. And you talked about it a little bit, that at one point, we'll get into this in a few minutes, but you talked about how you went through a transition as a coach and just start out kind of thinking one thing is important. And then as you go through it, you realize that, hey, there's a lot of other things that are a lot more important. I think most coaches can relate to that when you're young and you kind of are coming off, especially if you come off a successful career as a player, you kind of look at things differently and have a different set of parameters that you judge yourself by. And then as you get into it more and more, you start to look back and realize, hey, who are the people that had an impact on me? And how did they have that impact on me? And you realize that the wins and losses are important, that everybody likes to win, but it's also all of those other things that, we'll get into and talk about as we get more into your coaching journey. So talk a little bit about when you get done at Capital, you're trying to figure out what's my next move? What am I going to do? How am I going to get into coaching? Just tell us a little bit about the first coaching job.
Yeah. So Coach Zeller was at Graham and he was retiring. He was like, I'm out. And I call him and I'm like, Coach, don't retire. Come back for 1 year so I can coach with you. And like, you can teach me what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. Like, just come back for 1 year. And he's like, Brooke, we're going to be awful. Like, don't do it. Like, I'm telling you, we're not going to be any good. So he comes back, like, just like you thought he would. He comes back. It was an awesome year, just like being around him and that, completely different than when I was a player. But just a different appreciation for all the stuff that he did for his kids and for the players, and how he's just consumed with helping them be as good as they could be. And then, so I helped him for a year, and then he retired. And then basically I had to apply for the job, and it came down to me and another guy. And they asked me to be his assistant for a couple of years, because I was just out of college, and I just felt like, I didn't want to be an assistant to anybody besides Coach Zeller at the time. And I just said, just hire me or him. Like, I'm good. I understand if you hire him, like, he's got more experience than me, but like, that's not a situation I want to be in. So they decided to hire me, young and dumb. And it was it's where I graduated from. So I was 20, whatever I was, 23 maybe. 23. And it's the only place in the country I could have gotten a head coaching job, because I was awful at what I was doing. I had multiple games where I went in, and the the site managers for the other schools would like come up to me and say, "Where's your head coach at?" Because they thought I was a manager. But it was all good. I do think, obviously it's easier in retrospect, but I do think it was so good for me to get my ass kicked when I was young. So I didn't think I knew everything. It made me realize, like, I realize it more now probably even than I did then, like how little you actually know. Of course, when you're young, you think you know everything. You think you got it figured out. And I was a long way from that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. As a young coach, I think, you think back to what you did, and in a lot of ways, you feel like you did a disservice to those first teams that you coach. You're like, man, if I could apologize to those guys and just think about the way that you went about and did things. I know I coached 2 years JV when it was my first coaching job, and I just think back to it, and I'm like, man, I really wasn't, I wasn't very good. I basically just did whatever my coaches previous that I had played for. And, you're kind of chasing wins and losses, and you just think I wasn't very good at it. And I completely, understand exactly where you were coming from. That being said, was there something that you felt like you were good at that felt natural right out of the gate? Obviously there's a lot of things you didn't know, a lot of things that you look back on and you're like, man, I didn't do that very well. But I'm sure there was one or two things that you really did kind of have a handle on right from the beginning that you felt like, hey, or at least it was something that you really enjoyed, some aspect of it that maybe you weren't expecting, or just something that you were good at right out of the gate.
I mean, I would say our guys, we played hard. Like I knew what hard looked like. Like I didn't have this delusion of like, oh, you guys are playing hard and they're like walking everywhere. I never had that delusion, thankfully, because of Coach Goodwin at Capital. Like I knew what hard meant and what it looked like, and what, tough and being physical and really competing. I knew what that looked like. And I think that's been something that I've been able to convey to all the teams. And then the other side of it, I think, like I knew how to prepare, because Coach Zeller he was so detailed with scouting reports and, just prep for other teams and stuff. So I had an idea how to do that. So I would say those two things. But yeah, that's a good question. When I look back, I'm like, I'm not sure
that list is pretty short, huh? Well,
it is very short.
What was the hardest thing as a young first or second year head coach? What do you remember when you reflect back on that time as being something that was a real struggle for you to get a handle on?
Definitely my ego. I mean, just every game was a comparison. Like it's like if they beat us, then their coach was better than I was, and if we beat them, I was better than him. It was completely an ego fight. That's all it was, and that was probably the thing, and that's where all the emotional ups and downs and all that stuff. And everybody has an ego. I don't think there's any getting away with it, and a lot of us are in coaching because we're competitive and we like that, but there's a difference early on. I mean, it was a personal thing for me, and it was my identity was tied to whether we won or lost, and how we played. And I felt like if we didn't play well, I was a failure. If we played well, I was the smartest guy in the world. Neither one of them should have been true, obviously. But I think that was definitely my biggest challenge.
How long was it until you started to get a handle on that? Was it when you got to that transformation point that you mentioned earlier, where you started to be able to get a handle on those emotions? Because anybody who's coached knows that regardless of how good of a handle you have on those things, there's still those inevitable ups and downs emotionally throughout the season, when you win, when you lose games. So when did you feel like you kind of got a handle on that, to where it wasn't completely driving you up a wall when you lost, and where you could not, so you weren't having that manic depressive type state all the time?
Yeah. I mean, I remember it pretty clearly. Like, that kind of the tipping point for me, we win a regular season game by 40. Like we beat a team by 40 in the last game of the regular season. And we're like the 1 or 2, I think we're the 1 seed in the tournament. We play the same team that we beat by 40. We lose to them in the first round of the tournament. And like, I'm driving home from that, obviously, like wanting to drive off a bridge. But I I mean, I remember sitting in my driveway going like, I can't keep doing this. Like this, like there's got to be more to it. And it's got to be about more than this. And that's kind of what sent me to like a different, into like the reflection and really the deep dive into like who I wanted to be as a coach. I think up until that time, I was trying to be Z. I was trying to be Coach Goodwin. I was trying to be my dad. I was trying to be everybody that had coached me. And I think that's normal. Like I really do. I think that's a normal pathway. But I remember at that point, I knew I couldn't keep coaching. I knew I wasn't going to be coaching for 25, 30 years doing that. And so, the way I did it is I just burned the ship, man. I started completely over.
So what did the deep dive look like? Was that reading? Was that you sitting and reflecting? Was that journaling? Was that talking to other coaches? What did that process look like for you when you realized, hey, I got to make a change? What did you do to start to make that change a reality?
I got lucky more than anything, probably. I went to a coaching clinic for athletes in action in Xenia, and Dick Bennett was speaking. And Dick Bennett was speaking on his 5 pillars. And I just remember going, that's it. Like, that's it. Like that, like, what do I want our guys to leave our program with? Because I had never talked about that. I mean, we talked about playing hard, working hard, being selfless. We talked about stuff, but like actually taking the step to say, okay, like this precedes the basketball. Like this is what I want our guys to leave our program, having grown in these areas. And really the basketball stuff will take care of itself. Like we're going to do all the basketball stuff well, but I'm going to do the basketball stuff through these values or through what I believe. And I want our guys to leave our program with. And so, when I heard Coach Bennett speak, it was probably the entire off season. That's all I did was try to figure out what I wanted our guys to get out of our program. And really, like, it needed to be what I believe, because if I'm the head coach, like, I need to be the one holding them accountable to whatever it is. And so that's kind of where I came up with our core values. They've changed a little bit since that original one, because I've grown and I've changed my views on some different things, or I think something's more important, but they haven't changed a whole lot. So like once I got that, and then the basketball stuff became so much easier for me, because rather than trying to put in 1,000 plays, like I'd always wanted to run motion. I'd always wanted to be a motion guy, switch screens, man-to-man defense, switch everything. That's what I'd always wanted to do. But everybody would be like, you can't teach motion to high school guys. You can't switch every screen. You're going to get all these mismatches. You're not going to be able to rebound. And so we did our core value. I figured out what I wanted my core values to be. I said, we're running motion. We're switching everything. And that's what we're doing. And I tried to, like the very first year I did it, I put a bunch of like sets and stuff in to save me basketball wise. I was scared. And so of course, what do? We go in the first game, motion sucks. Like I'm in November. It's terrible. Like we can't even create any shots. And, so I've started calling sets. And by the end of the year, we've got 15 sets in. We're not running any motion. So the next year I didn't put anything in. Motion, one sideline out of bounds, one baseline out of bounds, motion, man, nothing else. I had no crutch at all. And motion still sucked at the beginning, but it didn't suck in March. By the time we got to March, it didn't suck. Because I kind of held fast to that. And so, the core value thing for us is like that's my deal. Like I know a lot of people talk about them, and a lot of people say they've got them and this and that. And I'm sure there's a lot of programs that do a great job with them. But for us, we're tough, passionate, unified, and thankful. Those are my values. Those are the values I live by. And so the people in our program, the kids in our program, I don't ask that they have those values. I just ask that they accept them and want to grow in them. And I say the same thing to the parents. If you don't want your son to be tougher, more passionate, more unified, and more thankful, well, then this isn't the program for them, because that's what we're trying to build in your kid. We want them to be good basketball players. Sure. Like, we're going to challenge them, but we're going to help them understand that for us, tough looks like positive body language. Like, that's how we define toughness. And so if you come in moping into practice, like, we're sending you out of practice. Like, if you get a foul called on you in a game and you put your hands up complaining to the official, like, you're coming out. Like, they have to understand that. And it's not because we don't like you moping. It's because it's showing a lack of toughness, which is a core value for our program. And so we've got them all defined like that and all connected to basketball stuff. So now when we're coaching basketball, we're building values too. And that, to me, I just feel completely different about it. And I actually did apologize to any of my players that I see that I coached in my first 6 or 7 years. I apologized to them because, like, I was terrible. I cheated them out of such a great opportunity, such a chance to grow and become, and contribute to their lives as husbands and fathers. And I freaking blew it. And so, I feel like I need to apologize to them. And now I feel like what our program is doing and what our coaching staff does and what our alumni guys do for our current players is, like, they help them become the people that we want them to be. And the basketball stuff, I mean, you guys know it, like, the basketball stuff ends up being so much better because it's like better people make better players.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I love what you said, where you are talking about tying the behaviors to the pillar. Because I think that's one of the things that, it's easy to put your pillars up and put them on a poster and be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. But I think when you tie that to actual behaviors that you and your coaching staff can point to and be like, okay, here's actually what we mean. Here's what we're looking for when we say be tough. Here's some examples of what toughness looks like and what we're going to be looking for. And then obviously what you're doing in practice and in games is you're recognizing those things with whichever one of the 4 pillars that a kid exhibits. You're going to them and saying, hey, here's an example of what we're looking for when we say be tough, or here's what it means to be passionate. And then when you tie that behavior to the pillar and then you reward that, obviously that's where the magic happens for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's our highlight. We make highlights after each game with our core value stuff. So it's like, that's tough. That's passionate. That's unified. That's thankful. Like that, like, we show them that and try to tie it back to them, because you're right. They need to see that example so they know what it is. I think the behavior part is the separating factor, because it's action. Like, I get a lot of questions about culture stuff now. And it's like, people want to talk about all this stuff about culture. Culture is what you do. That's it. Like, it's the behaviors of the people in your organization and your team. Like, what are they doing? It's not what you have on the wall. It's not what your shirt says. It's not how many games you won. It's what are you doing? Like, I don't want to win 30 games and be a bunch of turds. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm fine winning 15 games or 7 games and like us doing and being who we say we want to be, and, in aligning with our values. And I don't know, it's a big deal for us. Like, it's what we do. I mean, passionate for us is choosing extra work. We talk about, like, everything that you do in life is going to be outside of what is expected of you. Like, that's where you separate yourself. Everybody's going to do what's expected, or most people are. All the mediocre people are. Like, you got to be willing to do extra. And, unified is speak and act with urgency. We talk about unified, like, it's a communication thing for us, because I think, in my mind, one of the most selfish things you can do is watch a teammate with subpar behavior. Watch a teammate not touch a line. Watch a teammate skip a rep in the weight room and not say anything, because you're just choosing your comfort over the good of the team. He needs to touch the line. He needs to do those reps. You don't say anything. You're just saying, my comfort is more important than what this team is, than, the performance of this team. And that's selfish any way you cut it. And so we talk a ton about the communication piece with unified. And then for us, thankful is showing love. So we count, like, we'll chart touches and we count touches and stuff. We got rules. When somebody takes a charge, all 4 guys got to touch them. And turnover, everybody's got to touch them. And I don't claim that tough, passion, unified, and thankful, they don't need to be everybody's. They shouldn't be everybody's. And tough doesn't need to be positive body language. Like, I'm just saying it needs to be defined. Like, because a lot of people say they want their guys to be tough, and a lot of guys that have no idea what that means. And so whatever it is, whatever your values are, like, I just think they need to be defined. That for us has been a huge, huge factor.
Like I said, I think tying those behaviors to the pillars and then recognizing those as coaches, to me, is the most important thing that a coach can do. Because if you don't recognize them, if you just talk about them and the kids don't see you valuing them, then all that stuff just goes away and it just becomes words on a poster or words on a t-shirt, like you said. And so you have to make sure that you're creating that highlight film. You're talking about it every day in practice. You're showing the kids, hey, this is what it means. Hey, here's where player X was doing this, and showing their toughness or showing that they're unified. So I want to go back to that piece that you talked about, being unified, because I think it's something that a lot of times coaches struggle with, which is getting your kids to hold one another accountable. We all know that when you get to that point in your program with your team where the kids are upholding the standards and it's not just the coach upholding the standards, is that when you really, that's when things can really start to come together for either a particular team or in the long term for your program. So what do you do with your kids? How do you get them to understand and then have the courage to be able to speak up when they see a teammate maybe cutting corners or not doing something that they're supposed to? Because that's not easy for a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid to look at their buddy who they've known for 15 years and say, hey, man, you're not getting it done. You got to touch that line. You got to do that extra rep. You got to work just a little bit harder in this drill. How do you go about helping your guys to understand how they should do that, and then just getting them to have the courage to be able to do it?
So we work through Pat Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I've used it for, I don't know, I think it's 20 years old, right? Like this year might be the 20th year. We've used it for probably the last 10 years. But Lencioni's model is trust leads to conflict. Conflict leads to commitment. Commitment leads to accountability, and accountability leads to results. And so every single time, I think now there's a lot of people out there with leadership models and all this stuff. I think Lencioni's is the best. And I think it applies the most directly to teams, because every time we are not good and we're having internal problems, we're having stuff, it always goes back to trust. Like, there is some level of trust that is being violated that we have to address. And when we address it, everything starts, working back out again. But I think the thing that we are very intentional about, we have skull sessions before every practice. So a skull session is just, our guys are always dressed and ready 15 minutes before practice starts, which I'm sure a lot of people do that. We use that time, I would say 80%, 85% of the time, that is on our core values that the skull sessions are. And early in the season, especially, it's around vulnerability. So we are trying to get guys to be vulnerable, because I think the trust that carries over to a team is vulnerability-based trust. Like, guys got to be willing to open up and know that their teammate's not going to use it against them, right? And so, we do a lot of stuff. We'll talk about, we'll have like normal icebreaker stuff, like how many siblings do you have and things like that. But we'll do things like, we'll have them write a eulogy, like a 24-word eulogy. What do you want somebody to read about you at your funeral? If you don't want to go funeral, you can say at your awards banquet. What do you want the coach to say about you at the awards banquet? What are your biggest fears? Give us a big failure that you had, and you got to stand up in front of everybody and bow and accept, lean into that failure. Like, we've got a bunch of different activities that we do, and all of them are just poking into trust. Building trust, being vulnerable, seeing yourself be accepted for that vulnerability, and then somebody else returning that vulnerability, right? And then that starts that vulnerability loop where now he's going to be a little bit more vulnerable. Now he's going to be a little bit more vulnerable. And that's how you build trust. The coolest part to me about coaching is that there's no shortcut to that. Like, you can't just get a really good recruit and fix it all. Or you can't do any of that stuff. Like, it doesn't work. Like, it requires a team that looks really good and plays really well together, like that vulnerability and trust that has been built, and they have gone through experiences together that has allowed them to trust each other. And because once they trust each other, now you can have that conflict that you're talking about. Like I can call Mike out, and Mike doesn't take it personally. Like, oh, why is he trying to make me look bad? No, Mike just knows, like, I care about our team. And so I can tell you that you didn't touch the line, and you're like, my bad. Right. And so that trust allows the conflict to be present and to be effective. If you don't have the trust, then you get what you get most of the time with guys just arguing, like, man, what are you trying to say? You call me out, you snitching, like, you get all that stuff. But that is a result of not having the trust. And so from a coaching standpoint, what you got to do is you got to go back to the trust. Like, you got to go figure out, like, okay, why doesn't this kid trust us yet? Why isn't this kid opened up? And, you get some stories, man, with high school kids, like, they will tell you some stuff now. And, I say, like, laugh and crying and shared suffering. Like, those things are the fastest way to build trust. Laugh together, cry together, and suffer together.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more. So how much time are you putting in? You don't have to put a number figure on it, but just how much time are you putting in doing those things, and when does that process start? So obviously at Centerville, you're in a public school, so you have contact with your middle school coaches and coaches in your feeder program and that kind of thing. So what does that process look like just in terms of starting to build that trust with kids who eventually become varsity players for you?
Third grade, third grade. I mean, like, all those little interactions that you have with those kids at camp, you're building trust with those kids at that time. Like, you are establishing your relationship. So I think when you look at it through that lens, like, that changes. And they watch how you talk to your high school guys. They watch how, if you're laughing and smiling and joking around with those guys, like, all that stuff goes into it. So I don't think you're ever off the clock with that stuff. I just think it is a constant, I don't know if you'd say brick by brick, but I think you're constantly doing that. We start skull sessions with our guys. Like, our youth program is the Centerville Hustle, and they have, like, I meet with our hustle coaches from 3rd through 6th grade, and, like, I give them, like, exercises to do. Now, if you're dealing with 3rd graders, you're not going to talk about your biggest failure, maybe, but you might talk about a time you were embarrassed at school, or you might talk about something you forgot, or you might talk about a game that you lost. And, like, there's things to do. There's no age limit on it, but we get heavier into it in 7th and 8th grade. And then, I mean, our freshmen and JV guys are having skull sessions before every practice.
To go along with that, how do you put together the staff of coaches, whether it's at your middle school, talking about how involved are you in the youth program and just kind of training the coaches, for lack of a better way of saying it? I know it's a challenge out there for everybody to find good coaches at every level. So what's your process? How do you go about putting together your K-12 program?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It requires a ton of work. I think I was lucky because when I came into Centerville, my son was, like, in 3rd grade, which I didn't think about it at the time, but it was a huge blessing because basically I've gone through the entire program.
Yeah.
My son's going to be a senior. And so, like, I got to see, okay, well, I don't like that in the 3rd grade. I don't like that in the 4th grade. And so throughout that time, those first few years, I mean, I front loaded a ton of stuff because I could I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, I want them to be able to do this and this and this. So, I mean, on our basketball website, like centervillebasketball.com, I've got like, for our youth program, I mean, I've got a ton of drills, but then I've also got like a curriculum for third grade, a curriculum for fourth grade, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. Like, this is what we expect them to do. If you got a really good kid, then look at the next grade, and so it takes a ton of time, but it's also, I mean, you're investing in them. And, if I'm talking about being passionate and choosing extra work as my core is the behavior for passionate, well, then what am I doing? Like, if I expect them to work like crazy, and we expect our guys to come in at 6:00 every morning and shoot before them, I mean, I got to work.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think that's one of the things when you look at, especially from a public school standpoint, the programs that are successful have coaches that are invested in that youth program and their middle school program and are getting involved and hands-on. And obviously, as you said, your son going through it with him and being able to just experience that at each one of those steps along the way gave you a perspective that not everybody gets a chance to have. And so then you can look at it and say, okay, here's, as you said, here's what I want. Here's what I need. This is what has to happen. And as you go through and build that, obviously today, you and I talked about it a little bit on our pre-podcast call, but just thinking about the challenges of coaching at a public high school and what that's like and just the way the environment is. Talk a little bit about what makes it unique, special, and challenging to be at a public high school here in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, and I didn't answer your question about the coaches. I'll go back to that real quick. I mean,
sure,
it's hard to find coaches, man. It's hard. And the best thing is when you start, after you've been there a while and you start having some players come back and coach, that makes things a whole lot easier, which I think a lot of people understand and will get. But I would just say, like, for us, another one of Lencioni's books is Hungry, Humble, and Smart. It's called The Ultimate Team Player. But like, he just talks about when you're hiring somebody, think about people that are hungry, humble, and smart. And what I found is humble is the biggest thing. Like, just having a level of humility, because then you're willing to learn, you're willing to listen, you're willing to ask questions. That has turned out to me to be just kind of that's the one for me when I'm hiring coaches. I just want to be surrounded by people with some humility. And mainly because I spend a lot of time doing this. I don't want to be around an arrogant jerk, and I don't want our kids to be around them. So, and then I ask that they're open to our core values. And that is really, I mean, I think I've let 2 or 3 coaches go in 23 years of coaching. And it's always been because, like, we'll get to the end of the season, I'll have meetings with them throughout the year, but at the end of the year, I'll ask them what our core values are, what our behaviors are. And if they can't name those, they got to go. We're at the end of our season. There's no chance they taught those if they can't tell me what they are. And so, I mean, that's it. And it's really my fault that it got to that point. But the public school thing, I've just always been in public school. I think the public school advantage over the private school is that I can coach my kids from first grade on, or I know my kids and I know who they're going to be. And, like they know our system, our terminology, everything about us. I think I think that's cool. Like, I like it. Like, we had a little guy this year that was a first grader that would sit on our bench, and all our guys come in before school and shoot all the time at breakfast club from 6:15 to 7:15 every day. And this little guy started his own breakfast club at his elementary school. And so then, one day I sent Gabe and some other guys down to his breakfast club. And like, that to me is so cool. Like that, I think that's like, there's a lot of bad stuff about teaching and coaching, but those type of things make a lot of that stuff go away. And so I think that's something you get in public schools. I don't want there to ever to be a split between public and private. I want to play those guys. I want to play the best teams that are out there. I want to play prep schools. Let's go, let's do it. And but I think if you'd asked me my 6th or 7th year, I wouldn't have wanted to play him because I knew we wouldn't have much of a chance to win. But that's not how I define the success now. I want our guys to be challenged and compete, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if we'll win or not, but I want to see if we'll compete and be tough, passionate, unified, and thankful when things are tough and when things aren't going well, and other teams are really, really good. So having that different view of what I'm looking for and what success really looks like, I think helps that a lot too.
Talk to us a little bit about your experience coaching your son, Gabe, and you've mentioned him a couple of times. And for people out there who don't know, Gabe's committed to go to Indiana University next year. So obviously a high-level player, and playing for your dad can be a blessing, and it can also be a challenge in a lot of ways. So just how have you guys navigated that? You can go back as far as you want to 3rd grade or growing up, wherever you want to start that conversation, and then just talk a little bit about what are some of the things that have been super positive, and then maybe what are some of the challenges that you guys have faced along the way that, there's obviously a lot of other coaches out there who get an opportunity to coach their son. So just some advice that you'd have and what the experience has been like for the two of you.
Yeah. It's definitely been a blessing. I mean, to be able to share the things that we've been able to share together in basketball, and both of us love basketball as much as we do, and be able to, share those times together. I mean, it's pretty special. Gabe was, when I was at Graham, before I was at Centerville, Gabe was just like, he was with me all the time. So he was just, we had a little sticker board in the basement, and we would that's kind of how everything started basketball wise for him, where we would just try to see how many left-hand dribbles he could get in a row and how many, pound crosses he could get without messing up. And we just had all these little games and competitions, and really it turned into basketball's kind of his outlet, but really Gabe's more of a competition addict than he is a basketball addict. He loves basketball, but he really loves to compete. That's his thing. And he does that through basketball most of the time. But those sticker boards, I think, had a big part of that, and just kind of fueled him. And then, we just gradually make it harder and harder. But the interesting part was when he came to Centerville, he was in 3rd grade, and he had never played organized basketball, because at Graham, you couldn't start until 3rd grade. And so he had only done drills. Well, we come down here, and some of these kids have been playing organized basketball since 1st grade. And so Gabe wasn't very good. He couldn't, he was on the team, and he could dribble with his left hand. He could pass it with his left hand as a 3rd grader, but he didn't know when to do anything. So it was interesting from my standpoint to watch, because I was like, he's going to be okay, because he can do a lot of that stuff. He just can't finish it right now. He doesn't know what to do when. And I think of it as almost like the Europeans, where they practice so much compared to how much they play. It's 5-1 practices the games. And in the United States, it's just the opposite of that. And I think he almost had that European foundation of just skill stuff. And then once he started figuring things out, then he just kind of took off in terms of his ability to play, because he already had the skill set, but he was starting to figure out how to apply it all. And so, he went through middle school. Coach Holwager, who was my college assistant, coached him in 8th grade. I got Coach Holwager to come back and coach him in 8th grade because we had an opening, which was pretty cool. Because by that time, Gabe was pretty good. And one of the things that I was always concerned about was people not being hard enough on him, not holding him accountable to the level that he needed to be held accountable, and just letting him cruise. I typically am on the side of being too harsh and too critical of him. My wife will be the first to support that statement. But, coaching him in high school was interesting, man. I mean, we're at Centerville. We're in big school. We're playing Division I basketball. I didn't know if he was going to be able to play or not. But it was kind of his skill set was what allowed him to play. He wasn't big enough. But, I mean, he started at the point for us as a freshman, and it was really his skill set was really, really good. And he was able to do a lot of things that, other guys couldn't do because of that skill set. And, early on in the practices and stuff, his freshman year, everything was he was young and dumb and just scared. Like he's just trying to figure everything out. So he just listened to everything. By his sophomore year, he started thinking he knew stuff. Because, I get it. Like he's the same kid when he was, 8 years old. He's sitting in the middle of the locker room, raising his hand, trying to answer questions at halftime of varsity games, telling me what's going on, what's wrong. And, and he's, he's got his nose in our huddles while I'm drawing up plays this whole life. And so, when I would question or call him out on something or call somebody else out on something, he would always have a question. And, there were a few times we were pretty close to nose on a few occasions his sophomore year. But it was good. It was good. It was really my fault. Once I made the adjustment of talking to him after a practice or pulling him aside, just like I would pull anybody else aside, then that changed everything for me and for him. Like if another player had done something where I would want to talk to him after practice, for Gabe, I used to wait till that went home or on the way home. I was like, I'll just talk to him later. But when I started just pulling him in the office and just talking to him just like I would another player, then that helped a ton, and which was completely my fault. He didn't have anything to do with it. It was me kind of just being stupid with how I was coaching him.
How did he navigate having dad as the coach and just being a guy in the locker room? Because obviously in any locker room that you're in, there's always some coach, what's he doing today? He doesn't always talk. So how does he handle that? Do you guys ever have a conversation about what that locker room conversation sounds like, or how he handles it if a teammate says something about dad?
No, I mean, I have a pretty good, I'm sure there's some players that, rag me pretty good in the locker room. And I know Gabe's had to deal with a lot being, with players and with parents and with, kids in school. I mean, that's the thing that people don't realize with a coach's son is just how much there really is coming at them. Like it's a lot.
Yeah.
And he, he hasn't really ever said anything specific about it. I think he does a pretty good job of kind of diffusing it and like making jokes and just laughing about it. Like you're like, yeah, that's crazy. And I think the thing that helps him a lot with his teammates is that like he works his ass off. Right.
Exactly.
And that solves a whole lot of problems, and he plays hard, and, he was like our third leading scorer this year. So he doesn't shoot it all the time. And like the way he plays and how hard he works takes care of a lot of those issues.
Tell us a little bit about the recruiting process, both from your perspective as a parent, but also as a high school coach, and just how you guys went about making the decision and what some of the steps were along the way before he ended up committing to IU.
Yeah, it was, it was a cool experience, obviously, and we feel very blessed that, he had that opportunity to be recruited at that level. And had put in the work to put himself in that situation. I think for Gabe, even though he committed before his junior year, with the kids in his circle that he had been playing with and against, he was he got offers kind of late, which is weird to say that, he committed before his junior year and he got offers after a lot of those other kids that he had played with, like on the blue chips and with some of the other AAU stuff. And so it was almost like he wasn't sure he was going to get recruited at that level. And I think Xavier was his first offer, kind of surprised him. But he, it's weird. I don't know. For Gabe, like Gabe is not a 25 point a night guy. Like I always, like the way I describe Gabe is he's an acquired taste. Like you have to appreciate the things that he does to think he's really good. If you don't appreciate the things that he does, then he just looks like a pretty good player. Like but if you appreciate if you watch him and you understand and appreciate all the things he does, then you can see the value that he brings to a team. And So from a kind of a coaching and a dad perspective, that's what I was looking for in the recruiting. I wanted somebody that wanted him for who he was, right? And wasn't trying to make him something else or needed him to do this or that. But like, you know, and I know they'll ask different things of him in college, but understood that like his biggest thing is like, he's going to lead your team. Like he's going to hold guys accountable. He's going to bring an edge to, like, he's going to do those intangible things first and foremost. And then, you know, he's going to create shots for people. He can shoot it and he can score it. He's going to guard. He's going to take charges. I needed somebody from my perspective that valued and appreciated that stuff. And, you know, he was very lucky. I mean, he got recruited by several coaches that I think really valued that. And so that made the decision hard, but it also made it really cool because I felt like we didn't get to meet a whole lot of fluff. Like the people that got down to for Gabe, they were interested in Gabe for who he was and the player that he is.
It's interesting to hear you say that because I think when I go to a gym and you watch games and you sit in the stands or you hear people talk and you watch what parents and a lot of times I think other players watch and you look at it and you say, yeah, okay, like I see that, but like that doesn't necessarily translate to winning basketball. No, it might. I mean, there are clearly kids that can do things that are pretty spectacular that you see that also do some of the things that you're describing with Gabe. But I think as a coach, one of the things that you try to look at is, okay, who are the kids who are impacting winning in multiple ways? And like you talked about leadership, you talked about sharing the ball, you talked about just being willing to be a kid who, you know, is the one behind the scenes that sort of stirring the drink. And if you're really watching and you watch for any length of time, you can start to see those intangible things in a particular player. And it's always interesting when you talk to coaches, whether it's coaches on the high school level or coaches on the college level, and they talk so much about the recruiting process, where obviously if you're going to play at Indiana or you're going to play in the Big Ten or you're going to play in the ACC, there's a certain level of talent that you have to have. But so many coaches nowadays talk so much more about, hey, I'm looking for those intangible things that you described. And too many kids are out there thinking that, hey, somebody's here watching me and I got to score 25 points in this game, or I got to shoot it every time down in order to get noticed. And I think the best coaches out there understand that what the game's about is not how many shots you can take and putting up huge numbers in a game where you're shooting the ball every time you touch it. And instead, what's important is, hey, can you contribute to winning in a meaningful way? And how do you project at whatever level it is that you're being recruiting? So I thought that was an interesting point that you made, that you were looking for a coach that was going to recognize those things that were intangible, that maybe not everybody would notice, but that a coach was going to put together a winning program, a winning team would certainly notice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny because Gabe was going through that stuff and he didn't have very many offers or didn't have any offers early on. He was like, Dad, I think I got to score. I think I got to do this. It's like, you got to trust it, Gabe. Make the right play. Just keep making the right play. Just make the right play, the right play, the right play over and over and over. Like win. Like that's like they keep their job by winning. That's how they keep their job. I said, those guys that want those guys that are shooting 25 times a game and, taking a bunch of bad shots, you don't want to play for them anyway. They're going to get fired. Like they ain't
right.
winning.
Yep.
So like, just trust it. And, to his credit, man, he did a good job. He never got hung up on how many points he was averaging or how many, like he's been faithful to that. And it's cool to see it work out like that. For him when he's worked as hard as he has and he hasn't compromised like the way he plays.
How is your role different in this recruitment with your son, where you're not only a high school coach, but you're also a parent, versus when you had House get recruited by Florida State, where you're a high school coach and you're not the parent? Was there any difference in those two scenarios in terms of recruiting and just the conversations that you had with the kids?
No, not a lot. I mean, I'm really, really close to Tom and Rich. Rich went to Charlotte and Tom went to Florida State. So, I mean, I have great relationships with those guys and their parents. And so, I think I'm much more, I usually wait for those guys to ask me, where Gabe, like, it's just an ongoing conversation. With those guys, I'll check in with them, but I'm not going to give them my opinion on that because I want it to be their choice and their decision. And if they ask me, I definitely tell them. So I would say I'm just a little bit more, I wouldn't say hands off, but I wait for them to ask and initiate that because I want them to, it's their decision, it's their choice. And I think I'll provide the insight that I have and my thoughts. And both of those guys asked me a lot of times, and we had a lot of those conversations with those guys. So it wasn't a whole lot different. It was just more that, Gabe was just once we got into his recruiting stuff, it's pretty much all we talked about because, all we talk about anyway. All we talk about is basketball at home anyway.
For sure.
That's what we're watching. So what else are we doing?
Absolutely. All right. So speaking of that, let's shift gears and go back to the team as a whole. What does it look like for you guys over the summer? What are you doing? What is your summer workout plan, putting things together? Just what does Centerville basketball look like over the summer? I saw you guys at Midwest Live, which that thing was pretty incredible this year.
Awesome.
It was pretty incredible this year. I can't even imagine what they're going to do with that. For people who don't know, maybe or other parts of the country, or maybe just aren't aware of it, Midwest Live, they brought in a bunch of high school teams to amusement park. Cedar Point has a big 11-court complex. They brought in a lot of the top teams from Michigan, the state of Ohio, and it was just an incredible opportunity for teams to compete with one another. I just thought that thing was phenomenally well done. First year, and there was coaches crawling all over the place from all different levels of college basketball. I just thought it was great. But anyway, I know that was part of what you guys did, but just give me an idea of what you guys are doing over the summer.
Yeah. So, we still have our morning workouts. So we have what we call breakfast club. We work out. It's completely player driven. After our season, we have exit meetings with all of our guys. We kind of give them some workouts and give them some ideas of what they need to get better at for the upcoming season. So we have those 4 days a week. And then we lift 3 days a week. We don't usually, like in June, we might have some open gyms with like some other schools where guys are just playing. And we're not really coaching them. And then we save our coaching days for kind of those weekend live event things. Last year we went to Philly. We went to Philly live, which was awesome. And then we went down to Atlanta last year because Ohio didn't have a live event where they were playing. They had just the all-star selection thing. So this year we were excited to be able to go to the Ohio-Michigan one. And those guys Doug and those guys did an incredible job with it. It was great. We went out to Philly again this year, which was really, really cool. I mean, just we're in downtown Philadelphia with just our 8 to 10 guys just playing ball, in a live event there the weekend before. And then once you get into July, so many guys are playing AAU. So we just have our morning workouts, skill work, and then our weights in July.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just how it speaks to what you talked about a little bit earlier, just in terms of the amount of time and being passionate and putting in that extra time. The bar that's been set for just being average as a high school coach, the amount of time that you have to put in, let alone to be able to have the success that you've had and that your program's had, to be able to build that kind of success. I don't think people have any idea the amount of time that it takes that you're putting in order for that to happen.
Yeah, it's it's like everybody's idea of hard work is different, right? It's all on a spectrum, and so it's like it's funny. We had a couple kids move into our program after the season, and I can't remember what it was. It was like one of our first weightliftings. One of those kids didn't show up because we had an open gym that night, or we had something that night basketball wise, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't think we would lift today because we got a game tonight." I was like, man,
that's not how it works
this ain't
here.
That. This is not that. Like, we would lift the day of the game. It doesn't matter. Like we're trying to get better. That's what we're doing right now. Just forget about all that other stuff. We're trying to get better. And so it's interesting. It's interesting, but yeah, definitely the case. I think it takes some time.
Absolutely. All right. Tell us a little bit about your book, Surrender the Outcome. Tell me about
it. Yeah. Well, I mean, I wrote it really, I had the idea of writing it a long time ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was like, I like doing hard stuff. Like it's usually workouts and things like that. But the book first of all, it's really, really hard. You have a whole different respect for authors when you go through all the crap it takes to actually write a book and publish it. And so COVID was really, if we wouldn't have had COVID, there's no way I would have actually finished it, because when we were locked down with COVID, I was like, I'll just get up every morning and write for 3 or 4 hours and just knock some of this out and see what happens. So I get up like at 5 and I'd write for 4 hours, and it's only 9 o'clock. And you do that for a month or 2 months. That's a lot of writing. And so it was cool. It's basically, it's a leadership parable. And it's really about my coaching journey. I wrote it as a parable. A lot of the stuff in there is true, and about my kind of my process of going from, I would say, like a transactional coach and leader to a transformational coach and leader. And then at the back of the book, kind of like Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I kind of put like some how-to stuff back there on like how to find your core values, how to identify the behaviors that go with your values, how to put them in play with your team and with your group. And it's been cool. Like I expected to sell like 10 of them, and a lot more people have bought them and read them, and I've gotten, people have said they've helped. People have said they've helped them, and that's really it. I mean, I wrote it because I was like, man, I can't be the only one that sucked this bad to start with. Like I cannot be the only one. So hopefully it'll help somebody, shorten somebody's learning curve. So it wasn't the 7 years that it was for me before I figured anything halfway intelligent out. So, I've gotten some good feedback, and it's led to me like right now I'm working with a coach in California on identifying the core values for their team and trying to find the behaviors. That's really cool to me, to think that, can help that program really identify who they want to be and, be more clear with their culture and stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely. Being able to grow your influence, right? You're not only now impacting the kids that you have in front of you in your own program, but you can have an impact in far greater ways than probably even realize when somebody picks up the book and reads it. And if they're able to incorporate some of the things that you talk about, the ability to do that, I think that's what, as you get older, that's what we're all looking for, right? Is that ability to not just impact our small circle, but be able to expand our sphere of influence. And if you can do that and do it through the game of basketball, there's clearly nothing better than that. Tell people where they can find the book.
It's on Amazon. There's a link also on bluecollargrit.com. Which is I write a weekly blog on there, and there's a link to buy the book on there too.
All right. Thank you. Last question, 2-parter. Part 1.
Yes, sir.
When you look ahead over the next year or two, what's your biggest challenge that you see in front of you? And then part 2, when you wake up in the morning and you think about what you get to do day in and day out as the head coach at Centerville, what brings you the biggest joy? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Well, the biggest joy is easy. The biggest joy is just the opportunity to be around and coach kids and see them grow and mature and develop and, accomplish things that maybe they didn't think they could accomplish, and do things that, they didn't think they could do. And to do that together in a group and a team. I think life's a team sport, and helping them understand that, because I think there's a lot of things pulling kids now to individualize and like think about themselves so much more, and just to still have the purity of a team, I think I love it. I think that's what life really is. And I think everybody learns it at some point. I'm just hoping our guys learn it sooner rather than later. So that's definitely the joy. the challenge is like, I mean, one thing is, navigating Gabe's whole thing of graduating and going to Indiana. And then, I was telling my wife this, like, for the last 18 years, I haven't had a basketball season without Gabe.
Yeah.
Which is weird to think about. He's been in the huddle, in the locker room, in like somewhere bothering somebody for the last 18 years. And so, I think personally for me, I'll have to go through dealing with that and figuring out exactly what that looks like. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world. Obviously, I did it, for a lot of time before he was around, but figuring out how to balance, seeing him play at IU and still coaching our guys, trying to figure all that stuff out is really probably my biggest challenge I've got to figure out. Cause, a lot of people have like, you're probably not going to coach anymore. And I don't really know what I'm going to do. Like, I can't see myself without a team. I think that's probably what I keep coming back to is like, what the heck am I supposed to do if I don't have a team? Like,
just sit in the stands and watch.
Yeah, and I don't see that happening. So, I don't know. I think I'm looking forward to those challenges too. We got great kids. We got great young kids. And, our program's in a good situation. Our guys are bought into it and they believe in what we do. So we're in a good place.
All right. I want to first of all say thanks to you for being willing to jump on with us. Before we get out, please share how people can reach out to you, whether it's social media, email. I know you already shared the website for the book, but if you want to share that again, and then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up. Yeah.
I mean, I got social media. I just don't look at it very often because I don't like it. So you can, my email is bluecollargrit@gmail.com, that's on that website too. I mean, you can call or text me 937-244-2590. Hit me up. Do what I can. So, whatever. I think I don't even know what I think it's just @Brook Cupps for Twitter and Instagram. I don't know how to do Snapchat. We've got a family Snapchat with just my family, and all I can do is look at their pictures that they send me. So I'm out of the game on that one.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you on that. We'll make sure we find at least the Twitter. That's what we spend most of our time on. So we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. And again, Brook, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule to jump on with us. It's been a real pleasure getting a chance to talk to you, learn more about your program there at Centerville and your experiences with your son, which obviously are pretty unique. So again, thank you for your time. Truly appreciative. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.